What are the current biggest human rights violations that the United States is a party to? If not that it's directly causing, but at least contributing to?
Well, I mean, obviously the big one is one we've been discussing where, they're aiding and abetting genocide in Gaza. So that's a big one. Um, the, I mean, in terms of domestic policy, Human Rights Watch spent a lot of its time, and I describe this in the book, looking at especially racial discrimination that infected the criminal justice system. And the reason Human Rights Watch felt that we had a role to play there is because, while any individual criminal suspect could reasonably expect a fair trial, it's difficult for any single defendant to raise systematic issues. And you really needed the kind of investigative and reporting methodology of Human Rights Watch to demonstrate the patterns of discrimination that may exist in the deployment of police or in decisions about charges by prosecutors, decisions about setting bail, things of that sort that Human Rights Watch spent a lot of time on. So those that discriminatory angle of the criminal justice system is something that affects many, many people. Today what everybody is focused on is immigration, and here I think the law is behind people's moral judgments. In that, I think it's fair for Trump to come in and say, I have a mandate to reinforce the US-Mexican border. I don't think there's been a lot of pushback as he tries to do that. He is ripping up the right to seek asylum, which is illegal. But the idea that, Americans don't want, migrants just freely floating across the border, I think is kind of where the public is today. But the public is not in favor of these random ICE raids that are taking place in neighborhoods and workplaces where it is presumed that undocumented migrants live. And the reason is that, although Trump talks about, all these migrants being criminals and violent rapists and the like, in fact, the people being picked up are completely law-abiding in every way but their lack of legal papers to be in the United States. These typically are people who have U.S. citizen spouses, U.S. citizen children. They have jobs, they pay taxes, they're members of the community. They really are Americans in all but legal status. And there, I think, is a broad public distaste at the random roundup of these people and the deportation of them. And I think where the law has to go, it hasn't taken the step yet, is that we need to develop something like a statute of limitations for deportation. If you think about it in the criminal realm, most crimes, if you're not charged within 5 years, the government forgets it. You can't be prosecuted after that. That's what the statute of limitations says. Essentially, there's this assumption you can be able to get on with your life. We're not going to hold you responsible for something that happened a long time ago. In the realm of deportation, though, a statute of limitations doesn't exist. And I think it should, particularly because the longer people are in the United States, the more they build lives here, the more there are equities attached with their remaining in the United States. And that should weigh against the U.S. government's, legitimate interest in controlling who becomes a lawful American resident. And so I think there is a need to introduce this concept of a statute of limitations. Sadly, the U.S. Congress is so stymied by partisan jockeying that, it's been impossible to get legislation through. But this could be done in a sense, even just through presidential de facto policy. And in a sense, you saw, Biden and Obama doing that by directing their deportation efforts to the border, to new arrivals, and not raiding neighborhoods and workplaces. That Trump is now changing that practice is generating a lot of backlash. And it's, you can't say it's a violation of law. That's not what the law says, but it does violate people's sense of right and wrong. And I think that Trump is going to feel that heat if he continues proceeding with these raids in significant numbers.